Notable early instances of TDS include certain media coverage amplifying polarized responses to Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric, which some observers cite as initial signs of TDS, though precise origins remain understudied. Finding patient zero of TDS is also a priority. Oh, well, that's easy. I definitely know patient zero. It would be Ivana. Hey, shout out to all of the subscribers and members here on the channel. Don't forget to give the video a like. I am Reese Waters, and this is Street Politics. Well, the MAGA's done gone and done it.
Requesting the National Institutes of Health study the psychological and social roots of what's called Trump Derangement Syndrome. TDS is defined as having extreme negative reactions to President Trump. Davidson says the TDS Research Act would, among other things, investigate the origins, analyze long-term impacts on people and their communities, require an annual report to Congress, and would require no additional spending.
See, I think Ohio was jealous. Ohio was jealous because they haven't had any Yahtzees on the bridge, and they haven't had any racist councilmen lately or anything like that. They were jealous of the attention that Minnesota was getting thanks to Shiloh Hendricks, and then the connection through Michigan with the judge who's the new racist and all of that. I think Ohio was jealous. You know what I mean? That's what I think that is. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should.
Republican lawmakers in Minnesota want to, here in the state, add Trump Derangement Syndrome as an official mental illness.
The bill aims to change our state's definition of mental illness to include a form of criticism of the current president.
It's a bill that modifies the definition of mental illness, adding a definition for Trump Derangement Syndrome. So I asked the Republican Senate Communications Office to speak to any or all of the 5 authors of that bill that you see here. And I was told they weren't doing interviews. I was given a statement. The statement said these men recognize mental illness as a real problem, but that Democrats need to get real and understand they can't blame Trump for everything.
Breaking news right now. A Minnesota state senator just arrested, accused of soliciting a minor for prostitution. 40-year-old Senator Justin Eichorn is a Republican.
Whoa. Family values, really, Senator Eichorn? Right? You're happy with your family? Clearly. Senator Eichorn, are you following in the footsteps of another congressman from Florida that's no longer a congressman? Could be, don't know. Eichorn, I do think TDS is probably a good choice of the name for this, but I do think you should change it to Teenager Derangement Syndrome. It's probably much more appropriate.
Wait a minute, I think I recognize him. Is he the same dude who was handicapping Byron Daniels?
Donald Trump today announces that he will endorse Representative Byron Daniels of Florida for governor. In a poll conducted recently, it showed that Byron Daniels had a 1/3 of the voters in Florida with 31%.
I think I recognize him. He had a lot to say about Byron Daniels in Florida. Now, let me first address just how much the right wing refuses to learn from the misdeeds of their own party. How many of these stories need to occur before you stop as a group trying to pass judgment and legislate people's bedrooms? I don't understand. Like, I don't. It is. You know, they say what every accusation is an admission, and we might have to get that passed. Can we? There you go. There's your response, MAGA. You want to pass Trump Derangement Syndrome? I pass literally every allegation and accusation is an admission. Touche. I look forward to hearing from you. Well, I'm sure they're going to go pick up another MAGA representative so they can squash that investigation. Oh, there they go. They go another one. They got another one. How did you even get this number? This phone been off for 2 weeks. I would like to thank Aura for sponsoring this video. I don't know if you've ever tried to Google your name or email and shuddered at the results of what you found. It's terrifying. And there are companies that are called data brokers that sell your data, and they do it to pretty much whoever is willing to pay. And they do it without your consent and make billions. And while they're legally required to remove your info if you ask them, they make the process as difficult as possible. That is why I recommend today's sponsor, Aura, to my family and friends. They take care of the hard part for you, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. Now, I just found Aura a few months ago, and it's wild what they were able to find in a short amount of time. But Aura goes even further. As an all-in-one digital security, you may already have a digital security tool, but not having Aura is like locking the front door, but leaving the back door open, which my wife has told me I'm not allowed to do anymore. Yeah, so that is ill-advised. You can get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web, or it gives you real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure, a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more, plus US-based support. Yes, US-based support available around the clock if something goes wrong. And if that does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection, and they have US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. At least this way, we can fight back. And that is why I choose Aura. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/ReeseWaters. Again, that's aura.com/ReeseWaters. And those 2 weeks are enough for them to discover places where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. I want to thank Aura for sponsoring this video. They gotta stay off these streets. And then let's get to this part of it. So this legislation was floated on the state level that was headlined by a guy who got popped for the nastiest of crimes. And you decide to pick up the mantle and take it federal. You wanna finish his work? Is that what we're doing? Oh, hi, I saw what he left on his desk before he left, and he's making some good points. Who wants to do? Never mind. All right. For years, MAGA haters have been erupting in fits of rage when responding to statements made by the president. Now his allies in Congress want studies done to see if his left-wing opponents are actually suffering from a condition they've dubbed Trump Derangement Syndrome. Symptoms of so-called TDS are said to include an intense, often irrational hostility or obsession with Donald Trump, his actions, or his supporters. Here's the problem. The word intense and obsession. The word intense and obsession are problematic, because I don't know that Democrats or moderates or independents are waving not Donald Trump flags. I don't think anybody's wearing a not MAGA hat or has ever worn that level of paraphernalia for any representative in recent memory, maybe short of Obama. So if we're talking about obsession and intensity, that's gonna look bad coming from a bunch of dudes wearing red Trump hats made in China. Like it doesn't, that's not gonna work. The term is often used pejoratively by Trump fans to dismiss those making criticisms of the president. It lacks a formal psychological or medical basis, but is based on the extreme political animus towards the 45th and 47th president. Now, let's just assess the mentality that it takes to float something like this, but really just to qualify for MAGA, right? Because we haven't seen MAGAs, not the rank and files, levy any criticism at the president. Even when we've seen FAFO season, We have seen them try and protect, yeah, I'm looking at you, farmer. We've seen them try and protect the president even while complaining about things the president is actively doing. So this is the mindset. So you have to believe that it was a conspiracy that started before Trump was even president. Because remember, this dude came down the elevator with cases. Okay, he came down the elevator with cases. So apparently it was a conspiracy with the discrimination lawsuit with his housing, the racial discrimination. Apparently that was a conspiracy. And apparently everything that they had said about his casinos and hiding all the black people was a conspiracy. The casinos going bankrupt. I get what they plant the bankruptcies. They planted the bankruptcies. And I guess they shut down Atlantic City because everybody was just having too much fun in Atlantic City. So they done shut down Atlantic City just to make Trump look bad. Then I guess the Access Hollywood tape was doctored too. They went and floated the Access Hollywood tape was doctored. And then when all of the Republicans went and tried to collude in 2016 to prevent him from getting the nomination. Don't think I forgot about that. When they tried to collude to prevent him from getting the nomination, it was just for play. It was just for play. It was just for pretend. We just want to have this as something that he overcame because it helps his backstory that he overcame our entire party trying to collude to prevent him from getting the nomination. So that's what that was. Then of course, COVID is not going to be his fault. You know what I mean? So COVID was planned just to sink his chances and to be reelected. You know, so COVID was planned. Then of course, J6. That was an inside job. You know, that was definitely an inside job. And then all the 34 felony, that was all trumped up charges and all. And then all the people who testified against him, because if you remember, most, if not all of the people that testified against Trump congressionally were Republicans and people that were in his administration. And see what that was. See, they were just mad. What did P. Hexas say? Disgruntled former employees and hoaxsters.
Hoaxsters?
No, hoaxsters. Hoaxsters.
Hoaxsters?
Tell Hulk Hogan I'm not talking to him.
Hoaxsters?
No, they were all hoaxsters.
Hoaxsters?
You know what I mean? They just all disgruntled. And then the fact that, you know, because I know that it was a mandate, you know what I mean? Because everybody could see through all of this and they could see Trump and he got a mandate, even though I know that it was still one of the narrowest when it comes to the popular vote. But see, all those votes against Trump were planted. They were all planted. I really think like 90% of the people voted for Trump. You know, George Soros paid all them people. George Soros paid all them people to go in and vote for Trump. So that is what you guys have said about your beliefs. That is what you want me to accept as your stance, your platform. And from that platform, you want to say somebody else has mental illness. That is pretty much, that's where we're at. And by the way, don't think I forgot about the litany of grifts that he's been involved in since taking office the second time.
If you guys don't know, I was number 72 on the Trump coin leaderboard. It cost me $480,000, and this is all I got at the event.
This hat they gave away to pretty much everyone. They had 220 bags, and that's pretty much all I got.
That's just not what this video is about. But let's not forget that all of those are perfectly fine. Meme coin, paid meetings, the plane. I don't see no plane. Man, I don't see no plane. America first. Trump has been called an enemy of democracy, a fascist, and a dictator akin to Hitler by his political opponents, including from some within his own party. He's been so heavily demonized that his actions, maybe even his mere existence, have sparked nationwide protests, effigy burnings, and 2 assassination attempts. So to finally get to the bottom of what is fueling the outrage, Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio introduced the Trump Derangement Syndrome Research Act of 2025 on Thursday to study the phenomenon. TDS has divided families, the country, and led to nationwide violence, including 2 assassination attempts on President Trump, Davidson told the Daily Mail in a statement. Congressman Davidson, you might want to redraft that. Yeah, you might want to go ahead and look into those attempts. Yeah. Call came from in the House. Kind of like all the people that testified, same, yeah. Yeah. Back to just, you wrote it in pencil? You wrote it in pen. You're going to have to start over then. His proposal seeks to leverage the National Institute of Health's existing programs to study the purported disorder, and it shouldn't cost taxpayers a dime. Well, I'm sure it won't cost taxpayers a dime because it's nonsense, but let's also keep in mind we're talking about the National Institute of Health, which is under attack by RFK Jr.'s brainworm, who hasn't been able to do the work that they were doing to study and prevent cancer diagnosis. But we're deranged. The TDS Research Act would require the NIH to study this toxic state of mind so we can understand the root cause and identify solutions. The bill would provide funds to study TDS symptoms, its origins, long-term effects, and intervention methods. To avoid spending money on the program, the bill will reallocate NIH resources inside the Institute of Mental Health. Yeah. You know, as silly as this is, the only other time that I ever hear right-wingers bring up mental health is to try and deflect away from gun violence. And in that regard, this is actually the least objectionable. Instead of funding ludicrous studies such as giving methamphetamine to cats or teaching monkeys to gamble for their drinking water, the NIH should use that funding to research issues that are relevant to the real world. According to the Ohio Republican's office, the bill would direct the NIH to study the psychological and social roots of TDS. It would also direct the health agency to examine whether the media's coverage of Trump was a contributing factor to the spread of TDS. Now, what you don't want to do is get into the media's coverage of Trump, because that is going to uncover some very nasty truths, Mr. Davidson. That's not what you want. That is definitely not. You would leave the media alone, because he has done enough meddling when it comes to the media. You do not want that to come to light. Yeah. You don't want to attack and then investigate, because then your attack becomes, you know what I mean? You should know that. Notable early instances of TDS include certain media coverage amplifying polarized responses to Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric, which some observers cite as initial signs of TDS, though precise origins remain understudied. Finding patient zero of TDS is also a priority. Oh, well, that's easy. I definitely know patient zero. It would be Ivana. Their proposal explains that TDS manifests as verbal expressions of intense hostility towards Donald Trump and overt acts of aggression and violence against any person or thing that expresses support for the president. Now, I'm just curious, because the way that you outline that, overt acts of aggression and violence against any person or thing that expresses support for the president, verbal expressions of intense hostility, how do you think Trump derangement syndrome would compare to the Obama virus?
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
How do you think that would, because what I would argue is all of the massive delusion that I've just outlined is the stance and platform of the current MAGA. The things that you have to convince yourself, the mental gymnastics that you have to clear in order to make sense and for your worldview to maintain itself despite this insanity, has its origins in irrational opposition to Barack Obama. You know, that's another problem with studying TDS is, again, it's going to go some places you don't want it to go. You know what I mean? It's going to go some places you don't want it to go. It's going to give you some answers that, quite frankly, will be outlawed by virtue of DEI. It's going to get real CRT. It's going to get real CRT in there.
So there's this congressman from Ohio. His name is Warren Davidson, and he's introduced a bill to study the effects of Trump Derangement Syndrome, more commonly known as TDS. He declares it as a toxic state of mind. Now, I myself have been professionally diagnosed with Trump Derangement Syndrome. So what I've done is I've created a 5-question checklist. And if you answer yes to all 5 of these questions, you definitely have TDS, along with me. Number 1, do you use logic and reasoning to make decisions, or do you just obey the orders of billionaires? Number 2, do you display empathy for others who are different than you? 3, can you see that Fox News purposely creates hatred and division for the sake of profits? 4, can you connect the dark parts of history, aka Nazism, the Holocaust, to the actions and policy of this current administration? And finally, number 5, do you view masculinity as a way to protect women and children, or a way to exploit and control them?
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. You know, people have been able to live with a number of different conditions these days. And then when I watch the commercials, they dance in the commercials when they take in some serious medicines. You know what I mean? Could result in death. And they out here Harlem shaking. So look, if they can dance in the medicine commercials, I see no reason why we shouldn't feel love and acceptance in this moment. What we have here is a Shutter Island situation. We have a man in Donald Trump whose self-delusion is so strong. It has been so long since he has been receptive to anybody piercing his worldview with any light of reality. His self-delusion is so strong that he has forced other people around him to maintain that delusion just for their own self-preservation. And that has reached a national scale. And in that way, like most things Donald Trump, it's all fun and games until it's not.
Do you dislike Trump? Have you ever expressed hostility to Donald Trump? Have you ever questioned whether Trump may have some form of psychiatric condition that could be affecting his behavior? If you answered yes, congratulations. You have a mental illness, at least according to these 5 Minnesota Republicans who recently introduced a bill to add Trump Derangement Syndrome to the state's legal definition of mental illness. Now, of course, it'd be easy to dismiss this as just 5 Republicans pathetically pandering to their base instead of fulfilling their roles as elected representatives, which it is, but it's also much more sinister than that. This proposed law is an example of what's known as political abuse of psychiatry, a long-standing practice by governments all over the world whenever they want to discourage political dissent. The most prominent example of this is probably from the Soviet Union, which during the 70s and 80s institutionalized hundreds or thousands of political prisoners under the guise of mental illness, many of whom were diagnosed as schizophrenic in part for having a delusion of reformism, or a delusion that the government could be reformed. More recently, in Iran over the past few years, the government has sent citizens protesting the hijab law to correctional facilities to treat their antisocial personality disorder. In the United States, this tactic has been used on civil rights protesters like Clennon W. King Jr., who was put in a state asylum for trying to register for classes at the University of Mississippi in 1958, and on whistleblowers like Adrian Schoolcraft, a former police officer who was falsely kept for 6 days at a psychiatric ward in 2009 after revealing misconduct by the New York City Police Department. It turns out it's pretty easy to just diagnose anybody you disagree with as mentally ill and forcibly detain them for the purposes of mental health treatment. Now, unlike those examples, this proposed law hasn't specifically called for the detention of people with Trump Derangement Syndrome, but let's take a look at what it does do. According to the bill, it would amend a few statutes pertaining to mental illness by tacking the phrase Trump Derangement Syndrome or onto the beginning of any definition of mental illness, so that it reads something like, mental illness means Trump Derangement Syndrome or any of the conditions included in the most recent editions of the DC 0 through 5 Diagnostic Classification of Mental Health and Development Disorders. Where this becomes concerning is in regard to things like civil commitment, which involves involuntarily committing a person to psychiatric treatment. While this bill doesn't explicitly modify any of Minnesota Statutes Section 253, which deals with civil commitment, many of that statute's definitions are directly tied to the statutes that this bill does modify, muddying the waters when it comes to voluntary versus involuntary mental health treatment for what essentially amounts to disagreeing with Donald Trump. Of course, this bill has no chance of passing in Minnesota, but it's not unlikely that it might inspire future bills in other states. Because if there's one thing that Republican lawmakers love to do, it's jumping on the bandwagon of advancing meaningless legislation to pledge their fealty to Donald Trump. And this is just one in a long line of tools that Republicans are currently using to punish those who disagree with them. From ICE specifically targeting pro-Palestine protester Mahmoud Khalil to multiple congressional bills that would pull federal funding from sanctuary cities. This is not simply a trigger the libs moment from 5 pathetic Trump sycophants, although, again, it is also that. It's a symptom of a larger trend of Republicans realizing that the easiest way to silence their opposition is to take away their rights to speak up.
Hey, I would like to cordially invite you to my premiere. Did you know I premiere all of my videos? I have them every day, and I'm in the chat going back and forth with you guys live. So be on the lookout for notifications. And every day when we're in the premiere, I hear the same thing. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't get the notifications, which is something that I'm looking into, by the way.
What are you prepared to do about it? Don't let no one come into your house. Take your meal. Do what you need to do today.
Another way that you can help ensure you get those notifications is to subscribe to the channel. And also that helps amplify and boost our signal to make sure everybody is getting the message on all the good stuff that we got going on. Message! And of course, if you're interested in early access to the videos, the deep archive, the backstage, the extras, there is a link to membership in the description box to all of the videos. And if you like me, cheap is life. I remember my parents used to buy me shoes that were 3 sizes too big so I could grow into them. Well, the discount for the first month of the Patreon is running out, so make sure you take advantage of that at patreon.com/ReeseWaters. And all of you existing members, there's a code for you guys to try it for free for the first couple of months on me. Now, I want you to take a listen to something.
Turn me up a little bit, or just a little bit more. I got a message that I want to send across the world. Listen, baby.
Now that was sent in to us by Thomas Young, or as his friends call him, Preach.
Yeah, Ricky Fontaine.
Pretty Ricky, what they call him.
For use on my Way of Waters channel. Well, I'm looking for the exact same thing on this channel. So if you are a musician or you know one and you got a cut of music that you wouldn't mind going hand in hand with some really good jokes and social justice commentary, go ahead and send it my way at admin@reesewaters.com. And I'll end, as I always do, with eternal gratitude for helping us get to this point.